So a weird thing happened recently. It was somewhere around mid-April of this year that someone texted me and asked me whether I watched the newest season of Black Mirror. And I responded with, the newest season of what? Now the thing about this little story is that it is very much unlike me. I used to love Black Mirror. As a science fiction TV show, it was exactly what I liked. And usually for shows that I like, I put on reminders, I eagerly wait. Speaking of reminders, here's me reminding you to go subscribe to my channel. If you subscribe to my channel, you will get 7 years of good luck. And if you don't subscribe to my channel, you will be forced to declare bankruptcy in the next 5 months. Yeah, that's confirmed. Anyway, back to the video. And it is not like I didn't know that the 7th season of Black Mirror was happening. I saw the trailers, I just didn't care. They even tried to bait me with the USS Callister, which I didn't find myself caring for too much either way. You may see the word downfall in the title and raise an eyebrow, because the downfall that Black Mirror experienced isn't really as tragic as some other TV shows might have experienced. It still has a lot of people watching, so it's not like it's on the brink of being cancelled. But you can tell that it is not exactly the powerhouse that it used to be. Some of it is normal. TV shows lose viewership as they go on. It's a general trend. But the drop in interest in Black Mirror, if anything, is first of all completely unnecessary, and second of all, completely self-inflicted. So where exactly the show went wrong? The fact is that Black Mirror has become a bit of a flop. There are two distinct eras that Black Mirror as a show can be divided into. That is the first 4 seasons and whatever came after that. Some people like to be more purist about it and separate the first 2 seasons from others because that is when Netflix became involved. I personally don't subscribe to that type of thinking, but y'all do you. So after the heights that the first season gave us, we get season 5. Season 5 has 66% from critics and 53% approval rating from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes, just so you have an idea of how it was received. It has 3 episodes in total, and they are certainly episodes. It is this season that decides to show that the show doesn't really have that many ideas to carry the show anymore. So the first episode is called Striking Vipers and focuses on 2 dudes engaging in some gaming online through these little thingies on their temples that are basically entryway into virtual reality gaming, but futuristic and more immersive. I will be honest, I feel very indifferent towards this episode. Cool concept, interesting idea, serviceable execution. I am not shaking at it. It doesn't really give me much, but I didn't hate it. Some people apparently hate it because it's too gay. And honestly, grow up. But then we get to the second episode of the season called Smithereens. And this is where things get kinda wonky. Now, this is the best episode of the worst season in the show, and it is not as high of a praise as you think it is. Smithereens is an episode where the show really just scraps at the very bottom of the barrel and retrieves the good old tried and tested concept of phones and social media kinda bad. It is a slight oversimplification, but the execution of this thematic choice is what really ruins the episode for me. I feel like the episode can be a bit overhated sometimes as boring, but I actually like the dramatic build-up. We see this dude be out there doing Uber for some initially undisclosed reasons next to this very specific area. Then we find out that he was trying to snatch someone from a company called Smithereen that is responsible for the social media thing. And then he kidnaps a person to try and talk to the CEO of the company. It is a hostage situation that keeps developing through the episode, and things are relatively okay. But then, after the entire episode of build-up, the main dude does finally do the little twist reveal moment that he has been building up to. And do you know what he says?
It was very quiet. On my phone lights up and I check it. Because it's glanced at it, you know. Little notification thing saying you just glanced at it. That's all the time it took.
And it could have been at least a few different things, but this episode chose the most out there explanation that was available. And I do not know how to phrase it elegantly, so I will just say it, it's dumb. It's really dumb. Yeah, they really thought they were cooking with this one, but the pan was empty and the stove was not even on. Does this guy not know the general rules surrounding the use of phones while driving? What about maybe silencing your phone and then putting it away just to keep your eyes on the road? If you think that this is somehow meant to symbolize the man dodging responsibility, no it is not. The script instead tries to make a point how social media is made addictive because of profit. Which is kinda true. It's not a false point to make, but it's this moment where the episode just decides to decrease its IQ to room temperature, and it just ruins whatever this episode has to say. It isn't like there is nothing towards the direction of being interesting. The one thing that is kind of insightful is how social media company of the episode was way ahead of the police in profiling the main dude. But that is also a bit of a duh. Sure, it steals other data, but some of that data you give it yourself, fam. And it's not like they use it for a nefarious purpose. They they try to defuse the guy. So whatever they try imply here isn't really as impactful as it could be. This episode is probably a hit with Facebook moms who share Minion memes. So at least I guess there's that. I imagine that if this episode came out a few years before it did, it would have been something more interesting, maybe? And again, this is the best episode of the season. So now let's talk about the worst, at least according to popular opinion. So the third episode of season 5 is titled Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2. Yeah. It's the one that has Miley Cyrus in it. Now, apparently some people actively dislike this particular episode because Miley's involved in it. It is a pretty dumb reason if I'm being honest, especially since there is a plethora of valid, based reasons not to like this episode. For the record, I don't hate the episode, nor did I hate rewatching it as much as I thought I would. I find it hard to bring myself to hate an episode that depicts a young woman being trapped, used, and abused by someone else for profit. There's a lot of sympathy to be had here for the main pop star depicted, and I also think that Miley being the one to play her adds a lot of credibility to the performance. I also kinda like the dynamic between sisters Jack and Rachel. They actually felt like teenagers, which is usually not the case for TV shows. Now, with all of that being said, this episode is just kind of whack. I don't hate it, but I certainly don't like it. It is mid. It feels a bit like nothing. Now, some of it is the fact that there are already a lot of stories that touch upon similar themes and beats. It is not very unique and original. It doesn't exactly offer something unheard of or unseen technology-wise, nor does it actually do anything with that technology, except for that stupid song from Dreams Extractor thing that they put on Ashley when she's in a coma, but even that isn't really an episode saver. It also doesn't help that basically every character is just some sort of a cliche. Ashley, for example, boils down to her just being a young woman who has to pretend and wants to do something deeper, which is fine I guess for the plot, but it doesn't really bring anything of substance to the table. The sisters are also pretty cliche. The main villain is pretty one-note evil. There is just not much really to grab onto. Each character has just enough personality to supply the episode with plot. Then we also get the general tone of the episode, which is just a dumb movie tone. One of the main defenses for this tone is that it is supposed to mimic Disney Channel movies. Oh, so you're telling me that this was cringe on purpose? So here's where I usually stand on ideas like that. Just because you do something with intention, it doesn't mean it will always work. It may be in theme, but that isn't an automatic pass. If someone doesn't like it, it doesn't mean that they misunderstand it. You can completely see the full picture and still not like it. You want to mimic Disney movies, cool I guess, but Disney Channel movies also tend to be kinda bland and one-note and corny, so you can see how that doesn't exactly lend to being an interesting exploration in science fiction. And I dislike this sort of defense because it is not like it's impossible to come up with something that is in theme of that, but also in theme of Black Mirror. Flip the script, subvert genres or tropes, show a twisted version of a Disney movie, corrupt the concept, pay homage where is needed, but make it Black Mirror. Defaulting to dumb tropes to make this point is just not the most elegant solution in this situation. Yes, you can say that Black Mirror is this or that, but you can clearly tell that people willing to view this episode as Black Mirror and actually hold it in higher esteem are severely outnumbered by people who do not, which is where I guess the biggest issue comes in, that this episode feels the most disconnected from Black Mirror so far in the release order. Say whatever the hell you will, but Black Mirror did dig itself this particular hole of having people expect certain things from it. It has a very specific identity attached to its name. There's a reason why there's at least one person saying, "This is like an episode of Black Mirror," when there's even a mildly futuristic technology being introduced. Yes, my friends, I am coming to the astounding, never heard of before, groundbreaking conclusion that Black Mirror Season 5 introduces identity issues for the show. This season, when criticized, is usually said to be unlike Black Mirror. The biggest sins that the season commits, besides questionable writing, is that it doesn't live up to the standard and the expectations set up by previous seasons. It doesn't mess with your brain the same way some of the previous episodes would. This season is also what starts a pattern within the show that I don't particularly like, which is the show basically taking exactly what is happening now and just covering that in quite thinly veiled attempts at Black Mirror. It is a bit hard to explain and we will get to it, but you can see it with Rachel, Jack, and Ashley too, where the show just takes something that exists in real life and just makes it that into a story, but doesn't really add any meat to it, let's say. So this is a critical moment for the show. This season gets panned. Fans are, well, not big fans of it. The people behind the show can choose to listen and improve, which is a sensible option. But you can guess by the title of the video that the show indeed did not choose the sensible option. Actually, it kinda doubled down. There is an entire 4-year gap between seasons 5 and 6, the biggest that the show has ever experienced between seasons. A thing that rhymes with Verona Kairos happened, and we all know how well that went. Anyhow, the year of 2023 comes, and there is a new season. So the 6th season comes out out with 5 episodes in total, an upgrade from the 3 last time around. So you would think that yeah, there would be more content and surely the long gap would help the show get back on track. So let's talk about the first 3 episodes. These 3 episodes kind of remind me of the 3 episodes of season 5, which, if you couldn't tell, is not exactly a compliment. The first of the bunch is an episode called Joan is Awful. The general premise is that a streaming service that is a knockoff of Netflix is using a woman named Joan's life and producing a TV show out of it using some very advanced AI. If I was to summarize my general thoughts, I would say that this episode made me feel the exact same way as the Miley Cyrus episode did. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it. I feel entirely indifferent towards it. What this episode essentially does is it picks a few hot button technologies that already exist, use them in this very absurd way to make a very revolutionary statement of terms and conditions can be bad and oh my god no, artificial intelligence. On top of that, its tone is more so comedic than serious. The whole episode is this heightened reality because we find out that what we are actually witnessing is generated and we are just shown a level within the larger simulation, which would be fine. Science fiction isn't a stranger to exaggeration to make a point, but it also results in a lot of plot holes and underdeveloped script. The internal logic of this episode is non-existent. It basically relies on the streaming service being this omniscient being that somehow can spy on its target Joan through the little phone thing and manage to glean this perfectly accurate picture of every moment of her life that they can just then turn into a generated TV show. It's nonsense. But you know what? I can get over that. But what I cannot get over is just how shallow the episode is. If you use such a rather basic subject matter as AI and generative content and stuff like that, at least add meat to it. It is not the first time that Black Mirror dips its toes into some rather unexciting waters in regards to subject matter. I kinda dished on Smithereens for how it dealt with social media as a topic, but we can pull up 2 other episodes that dealt with it in more interesting ways. That is Nosedive and my absolute favorite episode of the entire show, Hated in the Nation. Both of them deal with social media. Nosedive exaggerates it to an extreme and makes it the basis of their way of living. Creates a sort of panopticon, except you are both the prisoner and the officer. You both observe others and are observed, therefore you punish and are punished if you act a certain way that is not accepted. Hated in the Nation uses social media as a bit of a weapon with #death2, but it also introduces another technology, the RoboBees, that are also weaponized. Both episodes use the very basic topic of social media, but they spin it to great thematic effect. Both also do a sufficient job at showing the consequences of such technologies and what kind of a world these scenarios would create. They add a lot of substance to make things work. Joan is Awful, however, chooses to slack on this essential world building and substance, and instead goes for a pretty shallow story. The one thing that just kept taking me out of it is just how everyone went along with the AI-generated TV show. Not a single character except Joan and Salma Hayek raise an eyebrow to the shit that is shown to be happening with Streamberry, which is odd. We see none of how exactly this technology affects anything besides Joan. Does the society that we see in the episode just accept AI use as common knowledge and therefore are desensitized to it? But then, why the hell is Joan so surprised and clueless when this happens to her? The episode just lacks any sort of grounding to make it actually meaningful. It just feels like the creator had a lit idea and wanted to try it out just for fun. Then we have the 3rd episode of the season called Beyond the Sea that has 2 astronauts up in space who have the ability to operate machine replicas of themselves remotely back on Earth. Dope concept, not very profound execution. The whole episode basically boils down to one of the astronauts going cuckoo after experiencing a huge traumatic event and thus lashing out because he's trapped in space. Not a very unique story, even if the circumstances around it are made unique by the technology. The episode kind of reminds me of Crocodile in a sense that technology is not the central point of the episode. It's just kind of there to spice things up, but at least Crocodile chooses a far more interesting plot for itself, while Beyond the Sea chooses a domestic drama that just amounts to an ending that is meh. This episode just kinda gave me nothing if I'm being honest. Then we have the 2nd episode of the season, which is called Loch Henry. I do not really have much quarrel with this particular episode per se, but it also didn't exactly blow me away. It is about a dude and his girlfriend who decide to go back to his hometown and find an opportunity to make a documentary about a local town mystery. I feel like it is a nice episode. The messaging of the episode didn't leave me profoundly shaken, maybe because I just already held the belief that true crime genre and profiteering off of tragedies is not a very nice way to go about living one's life. I can see how people may watch this and might take something away from it, so you know, at least there's that. Some people, however, are adamant that Loch Henry does not feel like Black Mirror, but I think we need to discuss this ever inconclusive question of what exactly is Black Mirror. Is Black Mirror this or that? Or is it the friends that we made along the way? Well, the fun thing about Black Mirror is that you will never get a conclusive, unified answer as to what exactly it is. It's an anthology, and it encompasses a lot of different tones and feels and plots and subjects. Some people can get a bit heated about their perception of the show, which is fine. I think that there is really plenty of completely valid answers that vary. That's okay. If you wanted validation from a random nobody online, consider it granted. You're very welcome for that, Pookie. But here is what Black Mirror was always about to me. Uniqueness. And specifically, how do you achieve that uniqueness? Whenever I used to watch a Black Mirror episode in the past, I would always walk away feeling like I had never seen anything like that before. I was always fascinated by how the show would find inventive ways to put characters in rather unusual situations. It would always have a unique angle to look at things through, and more importantly, quite unique things to say. It will also help that it was done through the help of technology. We can take a look at My Baby and My Darling Hated in the Nation. It is the episode that has left the biggest impression on me, because there is not one element that is mediocre about it. It has every element to make it great. It has a very nice piece of technology that would end up being exploited, something as mundane as innocuous as a bee, albeit artificial. It has interesting use of social media. It has a villain that doesn't even have a speaking role and appears only for a few minutes across the episode. It asks a question of, what if people who spread the hate online were to get consequences? Honestly, it is a very epic episode. Very masterfully done. Number one for me. And then you also have an episode such as Shut Up and Dance, which is set in present day. It shows people getting blackmailed through the use of technology. The technology itself is not advanced or anything, but how the plot is constructed and the premise are just so unique and interesting that it doesn't really matter. Yeah, so for me, it was always more so about the fact that Black Mirror just showed me things that I had never really seen before. But also, it showed me things that were somewhat possible to make by humans. A thing about technology, for instance, is that it is a man-made horror used by humankind to sometimes do bad things or not too bad things. And that is what is illuminated by Black Mirror. So I would be one of those people who would side-eye those who say that Black Mirror is all about the future and futuristic technology. Not exactly. It is not a monolith. Up until this point, every episode features some form of technology, but that technology is only meaningful when someone uses it, which is people. The show displays that technology itself is not always a bad thing, but it can certainly become that whenever people get involved. It uses technology to show things about people. So yes, Black Mirror is a great many of things. But I can certainly tell you what the hell it is not. So I told you that the season has 5 episodes, and we discussed only 3. And up until this point, I was if not satisfied, then at least just bored. I wasn't actively foaming at my mouth, and the show had a lot of goodwill. I was willing to overlook things because it wasn't just becoming egregious. But the 2 remaining episodes turned my boredom to something much worse for the show. Apathy. So the show decides that 1, it hates money, 2, it hates having a strong fan base, and 3, it hates having engagement. So the 2 remaining episodes are something called Red Mirror, which is supposed to be a departure from what previous episodes have been, and focuses on the supernatural rather than scientific. And it went as well as you would expect. This decision is so baffling that it could generate gravity on its own. It makes no logistical, financial, writing, whatever else sense. There is no universe in which this would have perfectly worked. And the way the showrunner of the show, Charlie Brooker, attempted to justify this departure is entertaining to say the least. When talking about season 6, he said that, "This season I started out doing some episodes with a very different take, a Red Mirror film, and almost like a crime and horror-led sister label, so to speak. And in doing that, I thought, I'll shake up what I think a Black Mirror episode is." Talking about other episodes in this season, Brooker said, "I started out and thought, I'm going to write some under the label Red Mirror for a while. That was where my mind was going. It's just the way they came out was really unpleasant. I was aware at the back of my head people had said, the last season was a bit frothy, wasn't it? Or a bit too cheerful. Well, fuck you." Famous last words considering, listen, I can understand not having enough ideas in the bank to continue the show. I think you can just feel tangible exhaustion with the last few seasons. Not having enough ideas to go on is okay. I feel like we should normalize things just ending. But pivoting into an entirely different genre mid-season is just not something that you do. I have seen plenty of people out there defending it, saying that Black Mirror is about the people and how messed up the society is. Sure, that may be true, but that defense is as nondescript as an empty glass jar. If these are the rules, then you can realistically make whatever the hell you want. And Black Mirror was never whatever the hell you want. I feel like people severely underappreciate just how wrong the decision to do this actually is. Speculative fiction as a genre is wide, very wide, and you can certainly say that both Black Mirror and Red Mirror are speculative fiction, but you absolutely have to to niche down. This decision baffles me endlessly, because niching down and having a unique angle is exactly how you maintain your identity. Additionally, for someone like me who dislikes supernatural horror, you can imagine that this Red Mirror did not keep me in. And then you end up with people saying stuff like, don't expect Black Mirror and you will enjoy it. Obviously, nothing against the person writing this. Good for them for exercising their free will. But if you have to say something along the lines of, forget that it has anything to do with the show it is part of, and then you will enjoy it, you obviously have a problem here. Then we get to the episodes themselves. So the fourth episode of the season is called Maisie Day, and it tries to say something paparazzi bad. The main twist is that the young actress that paparazzis are harassing is actually a werewolf. The episode is stupid, and there is a reason why it is the lowest rated episode across the entire show. Then we have the last episode called Demon 79. I already told you that I don't like supernatural horror, so you can imagine that my review of it would not be glowing. We have the main character who is named exactly like that one town in Lithuania on the Curonian Spit. Can I get copyright striked for playing the national anthem? Okay, anyhow, she accidentally summons a demon via a talisman that she finds, and the demon tells her to kill people or else the world will end. Honestly, it has a plot, it has characters, that is all I have to really say. It really is not my cup of tea. But what always pissed me off is how this episode would be defended whenever there was even a suggestion that it should not have been part of Black Mirror. To me, this is now an objective fact, because sure, we can have our own opinions on it. We may like it or we may not. But now that years have passed, it's very obvious that it has done more damage than good. If you go on IMDb or Letterboxd or whatever platform you use, you can more often than not see that both of these episodes are rated lower than usual. And that is not surprising at all. But in addition to that, the quantity of reviews is also lower. It is a very arbitrary number, but it does indicate a decline in the amount of people who care to watch, let alone were engaged enough to go and rate it. It indicates disengagement, it indicates apathy, which is something that you would not want to get. We also have to understand that we may praise or hate some episodes online, but people online writing essays defending episodes like Demon 79 are not representative of the general audience. And I can assure you that the general audience would not think twice before turning off the Red Mirror episodes. There is even one review that expresses exactly how I felt after watching these episodes, which says as its title, "We've lost Black Mirror," because that is what it just genuinely felt like. Red Mirror felt like it was the last few nails in the coffin, considering that previous episodes for past few seasons were not up to par with the rest of the show. Could this have been prevented? Abso-frigging-lutely, because releasing 2 episodes unrelated to the brand of Black Mirror under the Black Mirror umbrella is not the most elegant answer to people having the general criticism that Black Mirror doesn't feel like Black Mirror anymore. God, it felt stupid back then, and it feels somehow even more stupid now. And surprise, surprise, Season 7 received worse viewership than Season 6. Because of course it did. Even looking at the amount of reviews the episodes received, they were not even close to those that the episodes used to receive way back. And the biggest problem in all of this? Well, for one, this season is actually not bad. While engagement was not strong with this one, the reviews were much more favorable. And that is because the show finally stopped pushing hard against criticism and actually did something productive about it. This season actually feels like the show cares more than before, which is the bare minimum. The first episode of the season, Common People, shows the idea of subscription services being applied to healthcare, and we see a woman become dependent on a subscription service to stay alive. This episode resonated with a lot of people, but for me it was a bit too on the nose. In that sense, it's kinda similar to Joan is Awful, but I think that this episode is at least written slightly better. It's a fine episode, I don't have too many things to say about it. The second episode, Bête Noire, I actually initially disliked. The episode shows a character named Verity who creates technology that allows her to weaponize gaslighting in an extreme way, and she can literally warp reality. She can literally navigate the multiverse like Doctor Strange. I didn't like it because this episode had the stench of Red Mirror all over it. You can just tell that it could have started off with Verity just making a deal with the devil or something. The twist is that she has a supercomputer that allows her to navigate the multiverse. The explanation doesn't make much sense, but it grants her basically unlimited power and makes her a god. But when I rewatched it, I think I found comfort in the fact that the episode is just more about trauma than multiversal gaslighting. I think the fact that Verity was severely bullied and still carried that trauma into her adulthood really resonates. I think it was probably also important for her to be super OP to hammer in the fact that reality can be whatever you want, but it won't exactly fix the scars that were left within, so it's a cool episode. The third episode, Hotel Reverie, is the one real stinker in all of this. It felt pretty frigging useless overall, and I don't really have much to say. Came for Black Mirror, stayed for Emma Corrin. They did great. Amazing. The fourth episode, Plaything, had a dope concept but also was a bit fantastical. I didn't care for the USS Callister sequel, and I am rushing here a bit because I want to get to my personal favorite episode of the season, which is episode 5 titled Eulogy. This episode truly represents what Black Mirror is to me. It has a very basic plot at its heart. It is just an old man named Philip reminiscing about the past and taking a look at some photographs. But it finds a very creative way to tell that story and elevate that premise. It introduces a technology that allows for the character to actually step into photographs, which gives the character an opportunity to see things that he had not seen before, to recontextualize his life a bit and see things that he missed all along. The episode doesn't really have some deep, dreadful implications about humankind and technology, but it does leave you happy by making you think of what you too might have missed, what perspective you didn't manage to glean, what you may have misinterpreted, and what sort of unlived life was waiting for you out there. This is exactly what I am talking about when it comes to Black Mirror. It just invents a way to tell a pretty simple story in a very inventive and poignant way. It is a very creative and beautifully written episode. And that is what Black Mirror was always about to me. Which makes me mad. The reason why I even picked up to watch this season is because watching TV shows is what I do for a living. I would have entirely skipped it if it wasn't for a content opportunity. Here it is, season 7, which is something of a return to form for the show, just out there. And I may not have even watched it because that is just how much the weird decisions from the previous seasons have soured the show for me. And it wasn't some studio pressure. It wasn't the pressure to produce episodes fast. Black Mirror doesn't have a regular schedule and it is an anthology. It can come back whenever it wants. It was just the showrunner masking the fact that he kinda had run out of ideas at one point under the guise of wanting to say fuck you to critics of season 5 that had ruined the nice flow that the show had. It is somewhat of a historic fumble because you could have seen this happening as soon as the idea was uttered. There was no way this would have turned out any differently. So yes, while season 7 might be good, it might also be a bit too late for Black Mirror to regain its original popularity. It might manage, but who knows. I just hope it doesn't do something unnecessarily stupid again. That's all.